in this conversation. What is Horace Greeley suggesting? What does he have to say about the world cat? Go for it. Thank you. Good. Go west. Does Greeley imply the work's going to be easy? No. Go west, but hey, before you do, you might want to make sure you have some sort of a skill. All right, chopping wood, planting seeds, farming, whatever. Understand that if you go, does this imply that life is going to be very easy in the West? No. Who might this requester for advice, what can we learn about them from their request? Where do we think they live? Who do we think they are? What's their situation, do you guys think? Just from reading.
They're skilled.
They're what?
They're skilled workers in an unskilled job.
Oh, good point. They might be a skilled worker in an unskilled job. They might be in a northern city doing work that they're overqualified for and realizing that their life sucks in an urban factory type of setting. Yeah, they're looking for opportunities, looking for progress. Right? So it's important that so often I see this presented in classes, and all that's presented is the idea of go west. But the other side of the Horace Greeley coin you need to understand is him saying, like, it's not going to be easy. There's no handouts in the West. Life's not so easy in the West. It's not going to be super comfortable in the West. So today, like a good chunk of our... erase all this from the first period. A good chunk of our class today will deal with the middle of our country, put it like right here at Texas, westward. And we call this in APUSH the last West. Why?
It's the last of what's left.
It's the last of what's left, absolutely.
Or the last physical West.
The last physical West, sure, I agree.
The last big expand.
It's the last what?
Big expand.
The last place to expand, sure. Question for you guys. When I reference in APUSH the North, has the North changed in terms of where it is since colonization times? No, the North has been the North, right? We talked about New England and colonization, North versus, the North's been the North the entire time. When I refer to the South, has the South changed?
No.
Geographically speaking, no. I mean, sure, it's migrated a little further south, but it's been, for the most part, here since Jamestown. How about the West? The West has constantly changed. We have the first West, and then the second West, and the third West, and then the fourth. So this is the last West because our West, the western edge of our society, has been always something new, a transition. What's the other word for the last West? The frontier. Right? In American history, this is an important piece for today. The frontier has always been there. It's always served a purpose. One of the phrases, it's always served as a safety valve. A safety valve. Question for you guys. All of you at some point in your life will probably want to be licensed drivers, right? Drive around your car.
Oh, yes.
No, you're not. We'll get you some phone books you can see over the wheel. What happens if you overinflate a tire? Put too much air in it.
Pops.
It explodes. Right? What happens if you overinflate a city?
Disorganized.
You have a safety valve, which is the frontier. That people can leave overfilled urban cities, move out to the frontier, and have another chance at success. But what happens when you have no more frontier? What happens when you have no more safety valve? Yeah. You can make a good argument that this leads really nicely into our first lecture of period 7, which is imperialism. Once you have no more frontier, your new frontier becomes overseas. The next frontier. When John F. Kennedy, we're not there yet, so don't worry. When John F. Kennedy took the presidency, he got elected in 1960, and he makes a really important speech about how we're going to go to the moon in this decade, not because it is easy, but because it's hard. He has this whole program of space exploration. It's called the New Frontier. So that idea that in American history there's always a frontier to be explored. Arazo's dumbass was like, oh, like Star Trek, the final frontier. Sure, Arazo. Sure, just like that. But that idea of the frontier in American history is valuable. It serves as a place where if you're not successful in mainstream society, you can go try your luck on the frontier. You can go west. If you're a skilled worker in an unskilled job, you can go west. If you're unhappy with urbanization, you can go west. If you're looking around by like, damn, there's a lot of immigrants in my city, you can go west. But there's going to be some significant changes in the West that are going to make it even more challenging to quote-unquote go west. So for today's conversation, I want to put this in its broader geographic context. Big picture. So in our years after the Civil War, when does the Civil War end?
1860.
Yeah, 1865, Civil War is done. When's Reconstruction officially end?
1877.
1877, Reconstruction is officially done. You can make an argument that it was done a little before that. That 77 is just like the symbolic end. Like the Hartford Convention for the Federalists, they were already dead. That's just their like nail in the coffin. But the South doesn't want to get reconstructed, so the South doesn't. Long story, but in this entire time period, 1870 to 1900, it's important that we look at this three ways. Way one, this is the South in my cool blue circle. Right, the first part of this time period we have Reconstruction. Once Reconstruction falls apart, which is more of a period 5 thing, but it's still relevant because it's happening at the same time, we have the Jim Crow South. The rise of segregation, the rise of black versus white, the rise of separate but equal, the rise of the disenfranchisement of black voters, the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, the rise of lynching, and then the successful segregated society that the Southern white world builds, in which black people are still looked at for the next 100 years, 95 years, as second class, not even citizens, but second class humans. So that's happening in the South. We'll talk about that briefly at the end of class today and a little more in class on Thursday. But more so understanding that the Reconstruction falls apart, and with it, so too does the chance for black America to have a political voice. You're good there. We talked a lot in this unit so far about industrialization and urbanization. And the crazy thing about that is we spent a whole lecture on industry. What are we industrializing? What kinds of stuff? Railroads, steel, oil, manufactured goods. A consumer society in which we're buying stuff that we want because we can buy it because we can, because we have department stores. But we spent most of this unit on that, and all of that happens here in this red circle. So everything we've talked about, right, the big railroad companies, and the steel plants, and Carnegie, and Rockefeller, and Jay Gould, and J.P. Morgan / Peter Lopez, and all of these things are taking place in this red circle. So what's left is today's conversation about ranching, mining, and farming here in the West. Here in the West, outside this last West. And after the Civil War, we see pretty clearly that everything has become a state. Our red colors are our official states. Everything's a state except this stuff, right here in the middle. We have enough, because you have enough people to be a state. So we have a state Nebraska, state Kansas, thanks Stephen Douglas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri Compromise, we annexed Texas, sure. Compromise 1850 gives us California, Nevada shortly, right at the very end of the Civil War. So everything has become a state except for this last West, right here in the middle, that's still territories. Now in the South is recovering from the war, but after 1877, they're no longer forced to reconstruct or change their social, political, economic ways. We see Jim Crow, this era of segregation reigning supreme, as the white South legally segregates itself into two distinct separate societies, where we have separate schools for black Americans, separate buses later for black Americans, separate facilities, institutions, everything for black Americans versus white Americans happening in the South. But in the West, what we'll see is a continuation of this manifest destiny ideal. This manifest destiny ideal that was used to justify the Mexican-American War, that was used to justify Indian removal, that was used to justify all sorts of Western pushes before the Civil War, that will just continue post-Civil War, but this time with miners. What are they mining? Gold and a lot of silver. A lot of silver. Homesteaders from the Homestead Act, I'm talking about. And ranchers. What are ranchers doing?
Cowboy stuff.
Yeah, cows. They're doing cowboy stuff. It's a good movie about cowboys doing cowboy stuff. You should watch it sometime. Now, Brokeback Mountain? So, it's a good movie. So, moral of the story though, we see these new industries applying their new Western approaches to what was the last West, and by the end of class today, we'll have no more frontier. Right? It's the census, the counting of people that happens every 10 years. It's the census of 1890 that America looks at and says, oh well, everything is covered, everything is explored, everything is being developed, we have no more frontier. So then I think it's no coincidence that 8 years later we have our first imperialistic war. That we're fighting the Spanish, we're spreading out overseas. 8 years after we rule, the frontier is closed. There's a big connection there. So, what happens by 1890? We've established new states, we've closed the frontier. Look at all of our new states in the next 30 years. Colorado, South Dakota, Washington, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, a whole bunch of new states between the end of the Civil War in 1865 and 1890. All right, all that's left is the Oklahoma Territory, which is still largely left to Indians since Jackson. The New Mexico and Arizona Territory, which are still pretty sparsely populated. And Utah, who has not become a state yet. Interesting. Let's talk about Utah for a second. Why hasn't Utah become a state? There's a lot of people there. They have enough people. They can be a state. Question for you guys. Let's go back to the Second Great Awakening. And the utopian movements. Who moved to Utah?
Mormons.
The Mormons. Glad one of you was paying attention in period 4. This is good. The Mormons moved to Utah to stop being discriminated against, stop being hated on by society. And Utah has now applied to be a state. That's the process. And Congress has said, no, you cannot be a state. Because, any guesses? What?
Because they weren't considered Americans.
Because of its association.
Polygamy?
Yeah, that.
Because they won't outlaw in their state constitution polygamy.
What's polygamy?
Multiple wives.
Oh.
Multiple. That sounds like a good idea, Brett. You're going to have a harder time finding one wife, let alone multiple.
Wait.
So, Utah won't, it's a big political controversial issue. Utah won't outlaw polygamy in their state constitution. So Congress is like, no, you can't become a state until you decide that you don't want to have a bunch of wives running around. So Utah comes in a little later. But there's enough people there that it's not considered a frontier state. They're just a little bit different in their ways. Special. So here we have a map of what's happening. We see yellow being our cropland. It's a good map. Take a look at it. Yellow is our crops, our farming. Green is our forest. Orange is our predominantly grazing land, or land for our cows and our buffalo to eat. Buffalo, if you will. And purple is our sparsely populated or non-productive land. Land that nobody lives on, you can't farm, you can't do anything with. Where's all of our purple land?
In the West.
Yeah, in the West, right? Nevada, Eastern California, the deserts of the West, in which nobody lives there, there's not much you can do there. But, much like the market revolution earlier, it's Western raw materials that are really fueling Eastern factories. But, as we spread out, this comes at a very clear expense, as usual in American history, to Native Americans, to the point that by the end of class today, we'll talk about the end of Native resistance. You'll read a very sad piece from Chief Joseph, which is that we'll resist no more forever. We're done fighting back. We can't. There's nothing we can do about it. It's a pretty sad chunk. Another good map for you, looking at when Indians cede their lands or give away, sometimes most often by force, give away their lands. And we see to the east, before 1850, where have the Native Americans gone? Because this is our 1850 line.
The West.
Yeah, they've been going west. They've been going to Oklahoma. Who put them in Oklahoma? Jackson. We're thinking this will be Indian country forever until we need it back, and then we're going to kick you off. So we see the 1850 line, the 1870 line, the 1870 to 1890 line, and by 1890 we have this new idea of reservations, these blue areas. So where do we see blue areas, of areas that are still saved for Native Americans? Yeah, largely Oklahoma, some in Arizona, New Mexico, yeah, and then just random little pockets throughout. I'd imagine having access to the entire continent, and 350 years later having this. And I want to talk about this reservation system today as well. So this is a cool map. This is from 2004, so it's recent. And it argues who owns the West. And the percentage in red, the chunk in red, is how much of each state is owned by the federal government. How much of each state does the federal government still own in 2004? It's mostly the same today. Why is there so much more land owned by the federal government in the West? Take a minute to talk about it. Why? Why do the Western states have so much more federal government land ownership? Go for it. By the one that told you to eat a freaking orange in here?
You're allowed to go to
We stop you in 3, 2, and 1. All right. Why? What changes to give the federal government so much land ownership in the West? Go ahead.
Alright, so we're discussing and we're saying the east side over here. Since all the big businesses are over there, the government can't have control over big businesses since the big businesses own the government basically.
Sure, part of it.
On the west side, the government basically try to get people to go into those areas and populate them.
Okay. What was our government like when we had this much land? What is our federal government doing? What's our federal government size like? What's our federal government's influence like when we spread this far? Yeah, but what's up? States, right? Sure. What do we know about what has our federal government been doing all this time? Much? No. No, so as we've spread westward, a lot of it's been driven by private property, by people going out, by claiming land, by saying this is mine. But as we get over here, we get on into the Rocky Mountains, which now become like national parks, national forests, national protected land. Same here in the Sierra Nevada mountains, California. You never would have thought that almost half of California is owned by the federal government. National forests, national protected lands, national parks, Yosemite, Sequoia, Death Valley, all that. Nevada has the Sierra Nevada, they have old mines, they have Lake Tahoe. So as we've come west, it's more mountainy, it's more foresty, and by this point, like this is so urban that there's a real attempt here to keep things more rural and spread out in federal government control. But through this, the reason the federal government doesn't own all this land is things like the Homestead Act, which is largely targeted at these states, which is why it all gets given away by the federal government. The Homestead Act, the Moral Land Grant Act of giving away land for states to have colleges, and the Dawes Act, which we'll talk about today as well, dealing with Native Americans giving land to them. So, question for you. Going back in time, it's important that we create a national market. Why do we need to create a national market?
Make money.
What's that?
To make money.
Sure, to make money? No way. Why else? Why is creating a national market important?
No idea.
Yeah, you do. Why is it important we have a national? What is a national market, Noah? You're blank? Interesting. Interesting. So,
To connect both regions,
to connect both regions, why? Connect them how?
by giving them a common thing that they both desire.
Kind of.
So, like,
Kind of.
have like more industry.
More industry? Sure. What else?
So we can be self-sufficient, but we also rely on other countries.
Very important. Self-sufficiency, to make sure that we have a market for all of our goods, that you have places to buy things, places to sell things, places to get raw materials, and most importantly, a way to connect all of it. Who is a really big fan of creating national markets in history? Come on. Who? Clay. Right? Clay's American system is all about connecting markets. Making sure the Northeast is connected with the West is connected with the South is connected with the Northeast. Everybody's interconnected market-wise. That's Clay's American system. Canals, roads, bridges. And according to Clay, who should pay for it? What kind of government? The federal, the national government. All right? So we have California way over here. We have everybody else over here. So one of the reasons I'm going to push west so much is try to make sure that these things are interconnected. Now, who do I have on this picture? Who are these people?
Washington.
Nope.
That's not what
Jefferson?
Yeah.
Jefferson and Hamilton?
I got Jefferson and I have Hamilton. Right? And the question becomes, according to these two dudes, how do you create markets? According to Hamilton, how do you create markets? Sure, but how? Sure, how? Hamilton National Plan. Who should help?
Government should pay off the debt.
Guys, what's wrong with you all today? Why are you tired? Extra day off, first period was phenomenal. You guys come in zombie-ish, leaning down, kicking it, relaxing. Right? Like the lack of urgency is always offensive to me because I come in urgent, ready to teach. If you don't come in urgent, ready to learn, like I can only teach a blank wall so much. All right? So, who should help? What does Hamilton think should help support the creation of markets? What? Tariffs? Sure. What else? Bank? I heard his financial plan. How does that differ from Jefferson's view on markets? Take a minute and talk about it and try to get your heads on straight. Go for it. Chat it out. If not, I'll just sit down, put the slides online, and we can move on from there. Go for it. Chat it out. It's not my problem. All right. Let me hear. I know you have it. Let me hear from Chavez. What are your views on this? Glad you guys had a nice minute to chat it out. Excellent. Ruby, talk to me.
So in that kind of discuss the reason that they might be different for the fact that Jefferson was kind of more for like an agrarian society, so
Okay.
he kind of believed more for states' rights.
Sure.
While Hamilton was definitely more on the tariffs, so he was kind of more on the federal, and that's why the federal government should pay for everything.
Good. There we go. So Jefferson believes the market should develop on its own. Leave people to their devices. People will buy what they want, sell what they want. There's no reason to artificially stimulate supply and demand. All right, let things happen organically because he believes in that agrarian yeoman type of economy when people become individually self-sufficient. Whereas Hamilton argues we should become nationally self-sufficient. Instead of on an individual state basis, the government's job should be to assist markets, to artificially, if necessary, stimulate demand, stimulate supply, help businesses create markets, and then it will become nationally self-sufficient. In the first half of American history, up to this point, who has been more in the lead in terms of their legacy, economically speaking? You think? What has the government been doing up to this point for the most part economically?
Leaving economics to do its own thing.
Yeah, leaving it alone for the most part, right? Yes, there's an occasional tariff that causes a bunch of trouble. Yes, the bank has been here and then not been here. But up to the Civil War, for the most part, the federal government has kind of stayed out of business. And it's during the Gilded Age that in fact, changes. And one of the main ways that changes is the Pacific Railway Act passed during the Civil War. Very important is that we create our first transcontinental railroad and then a bunch of other subsequent transcontinental railroads. It's not just one. Here's the first one. It's the Central Pacific Railroad. So right there. The Union Pacific Railroad to right there. And then we, for the first time in our country's history, have an infrastructure link from east to west. Very important. They finally meet in Promontory Point, which is in Utah, right there, in 1869. It takes about 7 years to build this thing. It's largely the Irish immigrants building it westward. Who are the ones building it eastward? Good job, Luis. The Chinese. The Chinese immigrants building it eastward, and at which point American society looks at the Chinese people and we're like, "Why? What are you guys still doing here? Why? You guys finished the railroad. Why are you still here?" Because there's this belief in American society that the Chinese immigrants will come, they'll build this railroad for jobs, and then they'll go back to China. And America's like, "When are you guys leaving? Any day now, right?" And what are the Chinese doing? Yeah, not leaving. One of the reasons we have the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 is this upsetness in the West about why there's still Chinese people here. Right? Which is funny because in the East, what kind of immigrants don't we like in the East? What? Sure. What else though? There's a term we used in class on Thursday.
New immigrants?
Yes, new immigrants, sure. The bird, not Free Bird is a good old classic rock song. The birds of passage. The immigrants that come, work, and then leave, we hate them because they're taking away American jobs and they're leaving. But here on this side, we're like, why aren't you coming, working, and leaving? Again, demonstrating the hypocrisy of American immigration views and policy, because what we despise on the East Coast, we're asking for on the West Coast. Why aren't you working and then going home? Right? So we eventually see by the 1900s, we see two transcontinental railroads down here, one through northern Arizona to LA, one the Southern Pacific through that Gadsden Purchase area that was bought for a railroad, also to LA. We see the main transcontinental railroad we already talked about, and we even see one up here in the Northwest to Seattle. So there's now 4 clear links between the East, the Midwest, and the West Coast, connecting America's economy, connecting America's people, connecting America's businesses in a way that we've never before seen. Again, Henry Clay would have loved this. Would have loved this. Now, what this does is it connects us communication-wise. Right? So news can travel faster, demand can travel faster, information can travel faster, but it also leads to a ton of settlement and expansion. Right? In 1865, at the end of the Civil War, we have 35,000 miles of railroad track in America. By 1900, it's 193,000. So in 35 years, we go like almost 6 times the increase, a 600% increase, which is a lot of new railroads. Which creates an increase in commerce and trade, because it's not just railroads. What happens along each of these railroads?
We have pollinators.
What's up? Cities, towns that need goods, that need infrastructure, that need buildings, that need grocery stores, that need, et cetera, et cetera. So because now we can get our goods in and out, our world has significantly shrunk, leading to more commerce. And this is largely responsible for 2 big innovations. The first is standardized gauges, or making sure that we're on the same page with how wide a railroad should be, so that a rail car can get on this railroad and end up over here. But the second thing is, I think is super cool, is time zones. Time zones. Travis, what time is it? 11:46, 47. 11:41. 11:40. Who says?
The clock.
The clock. Who sets the clock?
They set it up like that.
God.
The sun.
God. The sun. No, not the sun. Because the sun will rise at a different point today than it will rise in a month. So if the sun comes up at a different time period every day, in the summer, the sun comes up earlier. In the winter, it comes up later. In the winter, the sun goes down earlier. The day is shorter. In the summer, the sun will be up until 7:45, 8 o'clock almost. It's still light out. If the sun changes time when it decides to get up, why do I have to get up at 5:10 every day?
Because you gotta work.
I'm not the sun. This is true. Thank you.
Because God said so.
Like, time is a human construct. We created time. It's wild. Think about it. We created time. Why do we create time? Because of railroads.
Nah, you're kidding.
Swear to God.
So there was no time.
There's no time. When do you get up? When the sun comes up.
No.
The
Yes.
research said so.
You can
So there was no
So
like,
there was
oh,
no
meet
time
me at
before
6
that.
p.m.
It's me
What?
when the sun's about to go down.
Yeah. Right?
Meet
Like
you
when
at
the,
sundown?
when the sun's high in the sky, I'll see you for lunch. Think about it. Right? Like, time is a human construct. A day is not, because a day is one Earth rotation. But the fact that a day is longer in the summer, shorter in the winter,
Okay, yeah, that's man.
that's science.
Wait, how's that science?
Because the axis of the Earth is tilted to the sun, so in the summer we're facing the sun for longer. In the winter we're facing the sun for shorter, because we're in the northern hemisphere. That's not. Okay, cool. That's not human. That's science. But the idea of time, the fact that it's 11:42 right now, that's human made. That's us. We created time. So right now, for example, according to Chavez, it's 11:46 wrong. So we'll call it 11:30.
How do we make clocks?
That means that because 11:30. That means in the Mountain Time Zone it's 12:30. In the Central Time Zone right now it's 1:30, and in New York right now it's 2:30. Why? Because the sun goes this way, so the sun came up earlier on the Eastern Time Zone. So the idea is that 11:30 looks the same in each time zone, but right now it's a totally different time in New York. So if you get on a plane, for example, and you fly this direction,
You go back
You
in
go back
time?
in
you go back in time.
Yo!
So think about it. So right now it's 2:30. Yes?
Yeah.
So you get on a plane at 2:30. Your flight takes 5 hours. So you land at what time?
7:30.
7:30.
But
When you land at 7:30 New York time, it's only actually 4:30 California time.
That's why there's jet lag.
That's why there's jet lag. Sure. If I
I
can explain one
technically
thing.
have two birthdays because I was born at 2:48 p.m. AM over there. So here it was still.
Anybody that's
11.
born within 3 hours of midnight has 2 birthdays. If you think about
I
it.
have 2 birthdays.
So I was born at 10:10 p.m. So do I. You're not special. So do you see my point? Isn't this wild? So, what time is the train leaving?
You got it.
5 p.m.
Depends from where you live.
Good. What time is the train leaving? If we're going to have all of these trains and all of this stuff happening, commerce, business, communication, trade-wise, we got to figure out what time is what time. Hence, time zones. And now in America, we have 4 time zones. Flying east, if you fly all the way from LA to New York, you basically lose a day. Because you lose 5 hours in the air, and you also lose 3 hours of time zone difference. I know. So you leave in the morning, you land, it's dark. You're like, what happened to the day? Well, you're flying opposite the way the sun's going. So more of your day is gone.
What if you go out of the country?
What if you do go out of the country? Then you're in a different country. Huh?
But how does
Maybe
time
more
work
than
over there?
time zones over there.
Same thing. Now we're on standardized time. So like 12, it starts in like England, Greenwich Mean Time. It's like the middle. And then it goes out from there. So if you fly back, for example, you can be on a different day. It's called the international date line. You go across, right? At some point, like a day has to start and stop on the Earth. On the Earth.
So when we're sleeping, people are awake.
Yeah, but think about it. Like if you go,
Like on the other side of the world.
if you go this way though, at a certain point, like you're gonna cross into a different day.
Like, isn't it tomorrow?
Because like,
Like something.
in Asian countries, we're like
In Asian
16
countries, it's
hours.
already tomorrow. But what if you go?
It's already tomorrow.
What if you go this way, or what if you go that way? So, moral of the story, we get time zones. But the big key here is that this is the part that's new. This is the part that's very Hamiltonian. Is it's the federal government subsidizing. This is the word I need you to see for today. The subsidizing of railroads via land grants. The federal government's not paying the railroad companies, they're subsidizing the railroad companies. Big difference. I'm the federal government. Johnny is a railroad. You guys with me so far?
Yes.
Johnny, I need you to build a railroad connecting San Francisco to Utah. Will you do it?
Yeah.
I can't pay you any money. Will you still do it?
No.
Why not? But I asked you nicely. Please, can you build a railroad? What I can give you instead is all the land on both sides of the railroad for 50 miles. And then you can sell that land to settlers. Now will he build a railroad?
Yeah.
Did I pay him?
No.
No, I subsidized him. I gave him a handout. I gave him something else that was valuable in exchange for what I wanted him to do. In a sense, it's kind of like bargaining, but now, how does Johnny become the most successful? Selling that land, because that's going to give him double the benefit. Benefit 1, he sold the land. Benefit 2, people live around his railroad and now need to buy and sell stuff, so they're shipping more stuff on his railroad.
You get paid if people use your road?
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Can't he set the price for the land? Or?
Sure. He's going to sell the land for what supply and demand will set the price of the land. So now the point is that the federal government's not paying people to do it. They are giving a handout in what's called land grants. The giveaway of land in order for him to do something. I'm subsidizing the building of the railroad. Big difference. Also, the amount of money you get or land you get is based on how many miles of track you build. So what do the railroad companies do then? Are any of these railroads straight?
No.
Look at the map. That's more miles.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. So the reason that we don't have a railroad that's like, boom. Well, first, once you get here, a little bit, not there. Once you get here and here, it's mountains. But for the rest of it, it's not like exactly straight either. They're just, doing their thing, weaving their way around, because then it's more money, more subsidies for the railroad company because they've technically laid more miles of track. Yes? No.
Say that.
That's not 50.
No, that's not. That's like 500 miles. So the big takeaway though is that this is for the first time the federal government creating subsidies for infrastructure as opposed to just like hiring somebody. Right? It's a very Hamiltonian, Clay-esque approach to infrastructure, which is very important to understand. And what we get out of the deal is we get a lot of railroads, to the point that maybe we have too many railroads. Those of you who remember from Grant's presidency, the credit mobilier scandal, that's this. Of these railroads, like creating fake companies, the federal government's paying the salaries, the whole corruption that comes off of subsidizing a private company to do government work. Interesting. Yes, sir.
Are any of those railroads still in use?
Oh, yeah. Rail is still one of the chief drivers of American commerce. Because anything that is heavy, you're going to be able to ship it cheaper on a railroad than you will a plane. Because a plane can only be so heavy. You guys ever been in the middle of nowhere, like out towards Bakersfield, and you see like a train, and the train goes on forever, and you're like, God, how is that thing even moving? But a plane can't carry that much weight. That's why they make sure that my suitcase only weighs 50 pounds. Wait a second.
It's like you.
What's that? Yeah, like a Louise-sized suitcase. But trains to this day are still a huge driver of American commerce. So in order for having all these railroads, what else do you need to go west? People. In order for railroads to become successful, you need people that will use them, people that will buy stuff they can then ship on the railroads, and where are the people going to come from?
The West.
Where are they going to come from?
Other frontier.
What act?
Oh.
Homestead Act. Yeah. So the Homestead Act is, I want you to understand how these things go hand in hand. Right? There's no Homestead Act without trains to get them there and to get them their stuff. And there's no trains without people. The people come because of the Homestead Act. So you have to understand how these things are very, very interconnected. There's a big relationship between the expansion of railroads and the Homestead Act. Now the idea here is that the government will give you 160 acres of land. That's like here, halfway to USC. It's a lot of land. They will give you 160 acres of land, and all you need to do is live there for 5 years, and then it's yours. Live there for 5 years, and you have to improve the land in some way. You have to farm it, you have to dig a well, you have to make a road around your land, do something to improve, to add infrastructure, to add progress to the American West. You file an application, you improve the land, and then you file for the deed or the paper that says you own the land is yours. Done. Who wins in this deal? Who talk to me, guys. Big picture, broad. Who wins in the Homestead Act?
Both.
Both. The people win because they can get land. Right? This is the free soil ideology from the 1840s and 50s, like acted out on. And the government wins because they get development of the West. The West is no longer the Wild West because it's being developed by people that are living there. Now, who's moving? Eastern families that are in urban cities, like Christoph said, that are struggling to make ends meet in a city environment because of industry, because of job competition, because of immigrants. We see some old immigrants, so that old generation of the Irish and the Germans, moving westward. And a new group, a term you guys haven't seen yet, exodusters. Ooh, first period apparently is not very biblically strong. I was like, what happened in the book of Exodus? And they're like, I was like, David Rodriguez, you always talk about Jesus. Like, come on, bro, help me out. Yeah, so in the book of Exodus, who other than Josue knows the book of Exodus, the general theme? Talk to me. What happens in Exodus? The people leave. Who leaves where? The Hebrews leave. What do they leave in Egypt?
Oh, I see.
What do they leave in Egypt?
Plagues.
Sure. Now, God, that's how they got out. What are they leaving behind?
I seen the movie.
The fact that they were.
What movie have you seen?
It was a Disney movie.
The fact that they
Finding
were.
Nemo?
No.
That's how I feel teaching you sometimes.
Why?
Yeah, cool. God, what did God free them from?
Slavery.
Slavery!
They came from slavery.
Yes, so it's the Hebrew people leaving slavery in Egypt. So who are the exodusters?
African American.
Yeah, freed slaves in the South, leaving the South and going to farm in the West because of the Homestead Act. There's no Moses in this case. There might be somebody named Moses. I won't say that actually. There might be a Moses. No Aaron. There's no firstborn son dying. None of that. So the idea here is if you look, Iowa and Nebraska, land for sale, 10 years credit. All you gotta do is come. The products you're gonna farm are gonna pay for your land, they're gonna pay for improvements. Life's gonna be good in the West. We'll go back to Horace Greeley. Is life gonna be that easy?
No.
Is it so easy? Is farming so easy you can just get up, leave, move to the West, and get rich?
No.
People think so, though. So who are these homesteaders? We see migration west skyrocketing. Migration west is skyrocketing because of the Homestead Act, which gives you 160 acres of land if you live there. Now, generally speaking, what are people going to do for money? What are they going out there to do? Farm. They're going out there. What else are you going to do with 160 acres of land? You're going to farm it. However, this is good in theory, but land in the West, in states like Iowa, states like Nebraska, states like eastern Colorado, states like southeastern Wyoming, this whole chunk, the Homestead Act is largely driven at this. I'll circle it for you. There's the Homestead Act. These states have a lot of things in common. What's the first thing these states have in common? The ones that are circled.
Oh, you could.
Maybe. No, it's super flat.
Dry.
Super flat, super dry. Who's ever seen a movie where there's like a tornado? Twister, yeah. Well, how does it look? Of course you've seen that. Tell us about it. No. So, Sharknado. So, that part of the world today is still super flat, super dry. They get a lot of rain, but it's all at once. They're like crazy thunderstorms. It'll rain, and then gone. There's not a lot of natural water sources. There's no big natural lakes. There's no Mississippi River to draw from. It's a very dry place. There's very little rain, and there's no trees. It's flat. At most, maybe a little bit of a rolling hill. It is a very, very desolate, flat place. Yes?
I had a question.
If it's about sharks, I'm not going to answer.
No, it's not about sharks. But, so like in all these places, like where you see tornadoes usually happen in America, did that happen back then?
Yes. No, tornadoes are a brand new thing. We just invented them, yeah. It's because of traffic. People drive really fast. They go over here. It creates wind currents all the way across the country that eventually... Think about it. Check it out. No, seriously. There's a lot of people that drive in the East Coast because there's a lot of cars. A lot of people drive on the West Coast, so like, it creates a lot of wind currents, and they meet in the middle and it creates tornadoes.
That's still the best.
That actually sounds right.
I'm talking about wind currents and whatnot. A lot of cars. No, that happened then too. So the problem though is, and this is important guys in terms of like the struggle, because this is going to play a large role all the way into the Great Depression. This is going to tie to some good period 7 stuff. Is none of these people are actual farmers. It's people from cities, it's immigrants, they're going into the West, and what most of them are doing is they're picking one crop. And they're staking their whole future on one single crop. The crops largely are what out here in the Midwest? Corn, wheat, barley.
Cash crops?
I'll plant some beef. Now, these are going to be called Bonanza Farms. In the West, they're going to be called, the word that I would recommend you know is Bonanza Farms. It's good. Short answer question evidence. Hydro farms?
No, the Native American.
With no water?
Oh, wait, no.
Dry farming?
No, they're like in the rivers.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So,
I know they're talking about it, but...
So what we see is that these Bonanza farms, these people end up stuck on one crop, much like we saw in the South with tobacco and then cotton. Now, if you're stuck on one crop, what do you need in order to be successful? Demand and you create the supply. Demand and good growing conditions. So say this is white America, right? I'm gonna grow corn. I'm going out for the Homestead Act. I'm gonna move to freaking Nebraska or the rest of the world. Anybody know the University of Nebraska's mascot?
Corn.
The corn husker. The pickers of corn is the University of Nebraska mascot to this day. So in Nebraska, I'm moving to Nebraska. I'm a homesteader. I'm an Irish immigrant. I'm going to plant corn. And then next year, I'm going to plant corn. And then next year, I'm going to get real wild. I'm going to plant corn. And then next year, corn. And then corn. And then corn. And then maybe the next year, I'm going to get real wild. I'm going to try corn. Is that bad for the soil? No way. Great question. That's terrible for the soil. So what we see is in the Midwest, the same lesson that was being learned by the people planting tobacco in Virginia, way back in the 1600s. That when you plant the same thing over and over and over again, you end up taking all the nutrients out of the soil, which was already a pretty dry soil to begin with, taking all the extra moisture out of the soil into a point when all you have left is really dry, fine, dusty type soil. This is why the Native Americans, from the beginning of time, do crop rotation. Where they have their plot, right? And I'm going to do crop 1, crop 2, crop 3. And the next year, 1, 2, 3. And the next year, 1, 2, 3. And the next year, 3, 1, 2. 3, 1, 2. And then 2, 3, 1. So the idea of rotating crops is a great idea, but if you're only growing one crop, Christoph, how are you going to rotate it? If you're only growing one crop, how are you going to rotate it? Farmer over there, but you're already using that for corn.
White corn.
Why corn? Because there's always demand for corn.
Isn't there like black corn?
Sure, still corn. So we see in the 1880s and 90s, and I'm going to do some math up here for you guys in a second, but in the 1880s and 90s, we see a collapse in prices. The Panic of 1893 hits. Late in the 1880s, this panic is beginning to hit farmers. So what results is people that have a lot of corn and nowhere to sell it. And if you're fully reliant on one crop, and that one crop struggles, what are your options?
Go broke.
You know what you should do?
So you land.
Plant more corn.
Wouldn't that
No, you shouldn't. That's what they're going to do. So, this frontier expansion happens at a very good time. Our northeastern cities, as you guys saw in our urbanization numbers in class on Thursday, are becoming incredibly overcrowded. So this happens at a very good time, but the living conditions in the West, as Horace Greeley referenced in the text at the beginning of class, are incredibly strenuous, incredibly difficult. Life is not as easy as what might be portrayed by a poster like this, which makes it look all good to go. Life is happy. Let's make it happen. So let's talk a little bit, too, about some of the ways this is going to change what it means to be a farmer in America. Now, back in time for me, please. Go back to the Jeffersonian era. What do you need to be a farmer in early American history?
Tools.
Tools.
Seeds.
Okay, cool. No. Wait, I'm not talking about plantation. I'm talking about just a regular farmer. Tools, land, soil, seeds,
Family.
and a family.
No wonder.
That's it.
Oh, and some chicken.
And a dog.
And a dog. So, bear with me. Is this a complicated life?
No.
No, but that's going to evolve as industry changes in America, so too is what it means to be a farmer. So, as our Western farms, due to the Homestead Act here in the middle of our country, become less about yeoman farming, less about an agrarian lifestyle, about becoming individually self-sufficient, they become more about single cash crops, much like the Southern economy before 1865. But let's pull from that for a second. How did it work for the South to have a one-crop economy? Long term, was that a good idea or a bad idea? Pretty bad idea. Because once they lost their markets for cotton during the Civil War, like their entire economy falls apart. So we take 0 lessons from that. 0 lessons. And instead apply the exact same economic theory to the West. Bonanza farming, single cash crops. Wheat, corn, barley, big food crops, but doing so in a way that's not just for your own consumption, but for general consumption. Now the farmers are taking all their profits and buying food at the general store, which to me is interesting. Because if you're a farmer, what should you be doing for food? Growing it yourself. But because the land in their mind is so valuable for their single cash crop, we see a huge emphasis on only farming corn. I can't give that land, that valuable real estate away to grow something else. I can just sell corn and buy what I need. So in a sense, even in a farming economy, this is the anti-Jeffersonian ideal. This is the anti-self-sufficient farmers just buying and growing what they can use, and instead much more of a cash crop world. We see farmers for the first time really buying manufactured goods in town, in their little wherever they are, or this is a new development in the Gilded Age, by mail order. By mail order, right? The way some of you might find a wife. So what we see is mail order, Brad?
Like a Russian one that they sent to you.
Jose gets it now. So a big firm in Chicago called Montgomery Ward, named for Aaron Montgomery Ward, is one of the first examples that you read about last chapter of department stores. What they're doing is they're sending catalogs or mailers to the farmers. And the farmers can fill out their catalog, fill out what they need, mail it back, and they will mail that manufactured good to the farm. Very much like what today?
Amazon.
But yeah, very much like Amazon. But now you can get on your phone, click, 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 boom, it's done, it's shipped the next day. Padilla, were you alive in the Montgomery Ward era? Are those pants you're wearing right now purchased at Montgomery Ward?
Yes.
Nice.
Indeed.
But he knows, like even like in my childhood, but he and I are that old. Montgomery Ward was a department store that has since failed. The next big the next big example of a department store that is selling goods to farmers. Any guesses?
Home Depot?
Oh, I got you.
Not yet.
Oh.
Lowe's?
Oh, no.
Sears.
No, no.
Oh.
Sears.
So
So
the farmers?
you can get, because they're not buying farm stuff, they're buying manufactured goods for themselves. That Sears, you can get your hands on Sears catalogs. They put one out a year. 1885, 1886, and it's a catalog like this of all the stuff. You can buy dresses for your kids. You can buy all kinds of manufactured goods for the farm, and they can buy it via mail. Why is that possible? Department stores in cities, mass production, railroads, getting it there. So for the first time, and this is the thing I want you to really think about, for the first time, farmers are becoming not just producers of raw materials, but also consumers of mass consumption. This idea of conspicuous consumption from chapter 25, of people buying stuff just for the sake of buying stuff, is not just the cities, but the farms as well are buying manufactured goods, consumer products, kitchen equipment, fun stuff, board games, the like. But for the first time, farmers aren't now just reliant on their farms. They're also way more interconnected with banking business, with railroad business, with manufacturing business. And as we mass produce our farms, we're starting to see farm owners buying expensive machinery for both the planting process and the harvesting process. And that's what leads to my next conversation. Yes, sir.
Yeah, East Russian.
You can hold on for a minute. Actually, yeah, just go.
Better.
Now, the farm becomes a factory as an important phrase for Gilded Age agricultural changes. You see, this is obviously an easy one. What's this one? Barbed wire, right? To keep your animals in and their animals out, right? They're keeping your cows in and the aggressive cow-killing animals, coyotes, wolves, out. Other examples of plows that are more industrialized. Here we have a self-binding harvester. This dude's just kicking it, living the good life. While his horses pull himself through the grain, it's harvesting the grain and it's binding it. It's tying it up together. Look at this massive, awesome piece of technology. All right, this guy's just chilling with this cool hat on. All right, life is good. So we see a bunch of industrial progress hitting the farms, but to that I ask, at what cost? We'll talk about that in a second. Now, it's not all easy for farms, because out on the frontier we see, and there's a cartoon you've seen before in this class on day one, these monopolistic corporations, so the railroad monopolies, the iron monopolies, the steel monopolies, other monopolies are keeping prices at a very high level for farmers at a way in which farmers can't really keep up with. We see railroads, the three important things that suck for farmers. The railroads, the warehouses, and the grain elevators are three levels of the distribution process. You got to ship your stuff, you got to store your stuff, you got to change the height of your stuff for other shipping purposes, are all going to charge whatever they want to transport and store farm products. Let me ask you a quick question though. Why are these three things charging whatever they want to farmers? What's lacking? Competition or government regulation. So because if you're a small farmer in Iowa, Nebraska, as a corn husker, I want you to apply there next year just for shits and giggles. You in?
Yeah.
Cool, thanks. Brett lives in Nebraska. How many railroads go through his small town in Nebraska? One. So who's there to keep that railroad from charging Brett too much money? Nobody, right? So then, not to mention at the time, this is changing soon, so bear with me, Noah. Most of the U.S. taxes are on property. Which industry has the most land, the most property? What? Kind of. But they're selling that land, right? Christoph, why do farmers have the most land? Because they need it. So as the U.S. charges taxes on property, not on income, who gets screwed? The farmers. So this entire situation makes things really difficult for farmers, and I'll throw some other stuff at you here in a second. The problem becomes our farmers become increasingly commercialized, our prices are dropping, our costs are rising, and the problem is farmers don't really have a way out to the math that I'm going to show you guys on the board right now. All right, so before you do your thesis check, which is right there, let's do some math real quick. You guys with me? So all eyes up here. Let's do some quick business math. Those of you that think you want to be businessmen in the future. We have Brett. We have Brett's corn farm. No, he's Brett's an exoduster. Brett's an exoduster, yes. So what we see is, Luis, you don't need to be giving anybody handshakes in the hallway. Nobody wants to see you. Come sit down. You're going to lie to me like you didn't just give somebody a handshake in the hallway?
I wash my hands.
Is that what I asked? Because I caught you trying to get somebody's tabs in the hallway. Sit down.
You taught me trying to what?
Sit down. Brett's corn farm. We can make all the racist jokes you got. I bet you making that joke is a history joke. It's a good job, nerd. So, Brett, what does he grow in his corn farm? What else? Stop. Now. What else does he grow in his corn farm? What else does he grow in his corn farm? Nothing. Thank you. Because it's a Bonanza Farm, all he grows is corn. Now here we have Brett's corn farm. The year is 1872. Brett, that year, he grows 100 pounds of corn. It's a good year. And he gets $1 a pound for his corn. $1 a pound. How much does Brett make?
Depends.
$100. $100. Life is good. So far, so good?
Yeah.
Now he comes to Winchell's Railroad. The Winchell Railroad. It's got to be the white man. And I tell him, that's fine. Good for you. I'm glad you have this $100. I'm going to charge you 10 cents a pound to ship all your corn all the way to Chicago so you can sell your corn. Pretty good deal? So how much does it cost him to ship all for 10 cents a pound? $10. So he's going to lose $10 to shipping. And there he is. He's going to make how much for the year? $90. It's a good year. It's 1872. That's a lot of money. Don't worry about it. We're going to talk about that next. So now Brett looks at his world here in 1872 and he's like, man, I made $90. Question for you guys. Logically speaking, you guys want to get into business. What does he do the next year?
Same thing.
He wants to grow even more. I agree. It's a good idea. So how is he going to grow more? He's just one man. He's got his family. How is he going to grow more? No. How is he going to grow more? How's he going to grow more? He's going to buy some machinery. So he's going to go here to Slade's industrialized store the next year. Slade runs the local industrialized goods situation. Let me erase that statement.
You love
Now,
a strong
frontier idea.
businesswoman.
So he made $90 last year. He's gonna buy something new for harvesting and something new for planting. So he can plant more and he can harvest more. How much do you think it's gonna cost him? $20. All right, $10 for each. So now to start the year, now the year is 1873. To start the year, how much is he already in the hole?
90.
To start the year all over.
Oh.
Yeah, he's already going to be negative $20. Is that okay though?
Yeah.
Because he's going to produce double. So it doesn't matter that he's investing in his business. So now he's going to do how much corn this year? 200 pounds. So Brett's corn farm is going to produce 200 pounds of corn this year. Life is good. Question for you guys though. If you produce more of something, what happens to the prices?
It goes up.
It goes down.
Why would it go up, Luis?
Because if you have more to ship, like you said, it would cost 10 cents a pound, you know, and you have even more pounds.
Oh, you're talking about like the distribution cost.
Oh, yeah.
Cortez, talk to me about the supply cost.
It lowered because
Why does it lower?
now there's more of it available, meaning that you get for less because it's less like scarce.
So since it's less scarce, since Brett's corn farm made more corn, he can't charge as much for his corn because there's more of it. Do you guys think Brett's the only one that produced more corn?
No.
What about his neighbor Josue, 5 miles down the road? More corn. His neighbor, no way, took a little nap but still managed to do more corn. Cortez, more corn. Santos, more corn. Luis, no corn.
I know.
He ate it all, yeah, right? He still weighs 106 pounds. Now, we've mass produced more corn, what happens to the price of corn? It goes down. It's not just a competition, it's just a production situation. So now, even though he made double the amount of corn, he's only going to get, what did he get, $1 last year?
Yeah.
He's only going to get 75 cents this year, which is still pretty good, 75 cents a pound. So how much did he get for his corn this year? What's 75 cents times 200?
Oh, let me do that.
150 bucks.
Oh, I was gonna say that.
So now he's at $150 for his corn, which is, we're still in good shape. But he spent 20 bucks, yes? So now he spent 20 bucks. So now he's at 130 bucks. As composed to last year, he's at 100 bucks. So far so good? So at this point, was that a good investment?
Yes.
Yeah. Already spent the 20 bucks, now he's up an extra 50, so he has 30 extra dollars of profit. Step in the winch railroad. Leave it to the white man. And this year, well, guess what? I'm charging him per pound. Does he have more pounds?
Yeah.
He has double the weight, and you know what? I'm going to charge you a little more per pound this year. You know how it is. You're a businessman, I'm a businessman. You know shit happens sometimes, so. Cool. All right. So I'm going to charge him, instead of 10 cents this year, past year, I'm going to charge him 25 cents a pound this time. 25 cents a pound after 10 cents. And he has more pounds. He has double the weight. So how much pounds does he have? 200. What's 25% of 200? 50 bucks. So out of this 130, minus $50 for shipping, and now how much money does he have? 80 bucks. What just happened?
He lost
He grew double the corn and made 10 less dollars. Ashley? Double the corn, 10 less dollars. Why? What parts up here are in his control?
just
Production. And the buying of equipment. So what does he do the next year?
More corn.
More corn. Corn. He's gonna, because to him he's like, oh, my answer, I gotta do 400 pounds. And then he's end up at 70 bucks. And then 600 pounds, end up at 50. Because it's not just him, it's happening to him, to him, to him, to him. And each farmer looks at this in a bubble. And says, if I just produce more corn, I will make more money. Not realizing that as they produce more corn, what they're doing is they're creating way too much supply, and therefore hurting themselves on cost. As a railroad, I'm going to charge him based on weight. So the more he produces, the more he's going to have to pay to ship it. So his answer is to buy more equipment, buy more equipment, buy more equipment. And eventually he's going to have one year where he's at negative 500 bucks. Now who gets screwed? Him, who else?
Railroad.
Now he can't pay for all his equipment that he got at the beginning of the year. And now Slane's business fails. And if he can't pay the railroad, am I going to ship his goods? So then who fails? Me. And then what? And then we have the Panic of 1873, in which it all starts with overproduction, railroad collapse, business collapse, banking collapse, because nobody can pay for their stuff because of the situation we put ourselves in because of this. I know. This is a complicated economic graph that deals with price index. I'm not going to ask you to know too much about what's happening up here, except for very straightforward. If it's in the blue, that means farmers are getting more for their crops than they have to pay for their other goods. That the money they're making from farming is enough to pay for the other of their goods. If it's in the red, what farmers are getting for their farm goods is not enough to pay for their other needs. So what do you guys see happening over time? Ruby, talk to me. Over time, what's happening for farmers?
They're not making much profit.
Oh, thank you for not saying money, but profit. Okay, and therefore?
They can't buy products for themselves. They can't really survive.
Okay, good. Good. So take a minute. I have a 2-minute thesis check for you. I want you to really understand the way that in industry and in farming, there's some real big similarities in terms of overproduction, demand, and the like. So I'll give you 3. What are the advances like in farming versus industry? How are they similar? How are they different? 3 minutes, any response from everybody? Go for it.
Wait, no background, no?
What?
No background?
No background, just thesis. Go ahead. How are these two things similar? How are these two things different? Come on. If your pencil's not in your hand, we got problems. If it's not writing, we got other problems. That both, in both areas, the group that's doing the work realizes they're very powerless, except by numbers. Good question. About 30 or so seconds left. The package is healthy. Get it in. How do they prosper? Who prospers? Who has the benefit? All right. Nicely done, everybody. I'm going to try to build in as many of those checks as possible as we get closer and closer to test day, so you have opportunity to write on demand with questions that we've covered, help cement in that learning to make sure that it is there and it is wrong. So I'm going to transition over to the next piece of the frontier, which is not Brett's corn farm, unfortunately. Brett's corn farm went bankrupt. Brett is now homeless, and he is living and working on the bank's farm because the bank seized it and took it over because he couldn't pay. Not banks, don't get excited. But Slane had to pay the bank from the stuff she borrowed to buy her equipment. Slane came after Brett. Brett couldn't pay anybody, so now the bank owns both their businesses, and now he basically becomes the equivalent of a homesteading sharecropper. Yeah, because now you're working for the bank. All because of some. No, you had some great corn. You just grew way too much of it. You don't blame yourself. Why you blame me? Well, my bad. Who should have kept my prices down? Why would I have kept my job is to make as much money as possible. Why should I have dropped my prices for you?
We could have monopolized the corn industry.
You should have monopolized the corn industry, and that leads us nicely into Thursday's conversation with the populace.
Oh yeah, I read that.
Guys, I have a very important announcement. Luis read about the populace. So, give it up for Luis.
I mean, I always read my homework.
That's debate.
Yeah.
Turns out, so, good. So, the next piece of the frontier is the cattle frontier and the mining frontier. I'm not going to spend too much time on them. But they're going to have a very similar scope and sequence as does farming. And that people start trying to do it to get rich by themselves, they end up failing, and big business takes over. We see with the cattle frontier, this connectivity of cattle trails or cattle drives, which are driving our cows north to railroad lines that are connecting them with where? Where are all the cows going?
East side.
What city do all the cows go to?
Oh, I think.
West.
Oh, wait, the one.
Where,
Texas.
no, where are they going to be slaughtered?
Oh,
Chicago. Chicago, yeah. They're going to go north, hook up with these railroads, be taken to Chicago where they'll be killed, turned into beef, and then eaten for lunch and dinner. Raise your hand if you had a burger this weekend. Attaboy. I haven't had red meat since the new year, and it's killing me. I would probably kill a small child for a cheeseburger right now. So,
My choice.
yeah, just because it's the new year, you know. I look good, man. It's almost bikini season. Thank you. So we see the cattle frontier. Romper season, baby. Let's go. I can't do that. There's something out of the romper. So, you're right there.
I'm ready.
I want to see the reason. That's how I want to end up like Luis in the video. You know, just bang. So good.
All right, just give me some May.
Okay,
After
cool.
the AP test, we go.
What are we betting that by May he still can't bench that bar? All right. If you can bench a plate,
Yeah.
if you can bench a plate by the AP test day, then I will bump your grade.
Oh. And if I don't, I promise I'll buy everyone food.
Done.
Oh.
Alright. Who wins in this situation? It's like the Homestead Act. Everybody wins. That is recorded too, alright? That is recorded. So I can't wait. And we'll all go the day after the AP test. Yeah. Luis, we'll go the day after the next third period after the AP test. We'll all go to the weight room and we'll watch you do it. You can't wait. No.
I'm about to get that A.
Cool. Good for you. No. The mining frontier is similar to what's happening with farms, but further west. We see gold deposits being significantly found in the western United States, silver deposits as well. And people again think they're going to go get rich like the farmers do, and instead they end up not getting rich. All right, mining really happens before farming as a magnet. It starts with the gold rush in California in 1849, the 49ers. We also see gold strikes in Pikes Peak, Colorado, Carson River, Nevada with silver. And each of these is going to cause a huge push westward by miners. All right. Very famous, the Comstock lode is going to find $306 million in precious metals in the western states. John McKay in the Sierra Nevada, so the border of California and Nevada, is going to create the big Bonanza Farm, which makes him, at the time, for a short amount of time, the richest man in the world. Richer than Carnegie, richer than Rockefeller, richer than gold, because he's earning approximately $25 a minute in the Gilded Age, because they're mining that much gold and silver from the Sierra Nevada mountains. It's crazy. Now mining, unlike farming, is a very diverse group. A quarter to a half of the mining population is actually foreign-born. We see a huge chunk of the world of the mining population being foreign-born. The Latin American miners, the first time we really see Latin American migration to the United States. They bring Latin American experience and techniques from parts of the world that already have a large mining industry. Gold is very prevalent, and so is silver and copper in some parts of Latin America. So they're going to come with experience and techniques. That's good. The Chinese are coming with a very specific work ethic and a willingness to work long hours to do whatever it takes. And because of that, we hate both groups. Right? They're bringing things that are good for mining, and America's like, no, not today. Get out of here. Beat it. So this increase in mining is going to lead to a ton of hostility over race, a ton of riots over race. We passed the Foreign Miners Act in 1852, which charges foreign miners a monthly fee just to be in America. A fee to be a foreign miner that native-born miners don't pay. Largely aimed at the Chinese miners. One of the reasons why the Chinese go so heavily into railroads is because they're being charged a monthly fee to mine. And then, of course, as I talked about in class on Thursday, the Chinese Exclusion Act, which we look at our western states, California, Washington, and Oregon, as very liberal on race today. Unfortunately, that was not always the case, as it really is the western states that are driving the anti-Chinese hysteria and sentiment, which leaves us with these anti-immigrant policies. Cool. So the last big piece of today, and it won't take us long, I wish I had more time for it, but I don't, is a really important development that deals with the closing of the frontier Native American-wise. Now, we have a series, and I would happily go into each of them if time permitted. We have a series of Indian conflicts in the West that are going to eventually end in Indians basically just saying, we're done, we quit, we're not going to fight anymore. It's not worth the risk. So we have some important names that are just helpful to know in terms of where they fit in the Gilded Age context. Cochise and Geronimo in terms of Apache leaders. Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull from the Lakota tribe, and Chief Joseph from the Nez Perce tribe. So these are just some names to have in the back of your head in terms of native conflicts. It goes a little deeper into the native conflicts in your reading. And if you're curious, I'm happy to pull other readings for you because there's some really good stuff out there that I'd happily give you. It's just important that we understand that this takes place after the Civil War as the U.S. sends their military to try to ensure stability in the West. Especially as Reconstruction ends, we have this military that's not in the South anymore. We largely send them to the West to deal with native conflicts. Now, why is there conflict with the natives? First, railroads. Right? The natives don't like the fact that the railroads are going through their tribal land, that the trains are disturbing their ability to hunt, to gather, to farm. But in 1864, so right actually at the tail end of the Civil War, we have the Sand Creek Massacre, which you guys read about, which deals with the U.S. Army, the military, going into a native village and actually just slaughtering men, women, children in the village as a means to try to make a statement that we're coming out, we're spreading westward, there's nothing you guys can do about it. Worth noting as well is the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876, which is considered Custer's last stand, General George Custer. And in it, the Native Americans actually surround the U.S. Army force and kill or injure almost all of it, so the U.S. Army has to actually retreat. So a huge win for the Native Americans, but as you guys know, that's only going to be short-term. Like the battles that the Native Americans won early in American history, like Pontiac's Rebellion, eventually the U.S. Army is going to come back in force, and they do that at the Battle of Wounded Knee, which is up here in the Dakotas. And the Battle of Wounded Knee is considered the last example of Native American resistance in American history. By now we talked about like Pequot's War, King Philip's War, as the last example of Native American resistance in New England during colonization. By 1890, there's no more organized resistance by Native American tribes for the rest of U.S. history. That's it. They're done resisting. Where did they go? We'll talk about that next. So yeah, where they go is reservations. They go and they go where the government tells them, and they do what the government says, and they do their own thing separate from American society, but in a way that is quite demeaning. Yeah.
Wait, so does that mean they still kind of, like right now, do they have like their own kind of government or form of government?
So right now, the Native American reservations are considered sovereign nations, not part of the United States. So that's why when you see casinos in California, Morongo, all the casinos are on Native American land. Because you can't legally gamble in California. But if you were on a Native American reservation, you gamble.
Oh, for real?
Dang.
That's the Native American revenge.
Like in Las Vegas?
No, Vegas is different because Nevada is legal. Yeah. Yep. Citadel.
That's the-
Morongo is the bigger one down like closer to Temecula, the big one. Cool. So turn your page, please. I know. Turn your page. I have two like super impactful, in my opinion, texts. One from Chief Joseph, as he says, "We will resist no more forever." And the second, this is the third now straight class in which you've gotten a very important book in American history. Right? You got Henry George, Progress and Poverty. About how come every time we advance as a society, we get poorer at the bottom. That was important. It was in your textbook as well. Last class, what was the book you guys read from?
George Orwell. Oh,
Thursday's a long time ago.
Carnegie.
No. That was 2 classes ago. Jacob Rees, How the Other Half Lives. Yeah. And then this one is from Helen Hunt Jackson, A Century of Dishonor. Talking about for the last 100 plus years, America has been abusing Native Americans. So all 3 books have something in common. What do they all have in common, Josue?
Talk about the bottom of society.
Talk to me. What do they have in common?
A perspective from the like low class.
Yeah.
Criticizing the high.
It's a critique of American society, right? Progress and Poverty, critique the consolidation of wealth at the top. How the Other Half Lives, critiques America for letting people live like this. And this is going to critique the way we treat Native Americans. So this is a big important theme, a trend in the second semester of people using literature to actually expose and critique policies and what's happening action-wise. So I'm going to have you read both of them. Not one, both. The Native American perspective and the white female journalist who's trying to expose what's happening. And answer the 2 questions for me. But they both give a pretty sad, depressing look at true Native Americans. I'm going to give you 6 minutes for both of them. This should be pretty easy. Read. Go for it. two perspectives. What do they offer in terms of understanding on Native American policies? A minute and a half or so left. Good for you. Congratulations. Cool. Congratulations. Stay with me 30 or so seconds. Get the second chunk read. There's a couple of really good lines in there. It's a longer book, but I figure short would be better. Well, Brett's corn farm. Come see me, Mom. Got 10 minutes left, guys. So finish strong for me. Finish strong, finish strong. Five seconds. 4 seconds. All right. So I want to draw you to a couple lines that I thought were especially impactful. The first is Chief Joseph's first line of paragraph 2, which is, to me, that one of the biggest continuities in American history. We gave up some of our country to the white men, thinking that then we could have peace. We were mistaken. Right across all of U.S. history, the perspective is like, oh, we'll share, we'll move over here, we'll let you stay there, and we'll be good to go. How has that worked for the natives? No, because every single time, white society in America is going to want more. From the bottom chunk by Helen Hunt Jackson, it makes, this is a very, I don't know, sad line. It makes little difference where one opens the record of the history of the Indians. Every page and every year has its dark stain. The story of one tribe is the story of all, varied only by differences of time and place. Colorado is as greedy and unjust in 1880 as was Georgia in 1830, Jackson, Indian removal, and Ohio in 1795, and the U.S. government breaks promises now as deftly as then, with the added ingenuity from long practice. All the government's done is gotten better at breaking promises. So it's a sad perspective, and what results from it is the Dawes Act. The Dawes Act is supposed to encourage Native Americans to farm by doing with them what we did with the Homestead Act for white settlers, dividing up their land into 160-acre plots and saying, you get a plot, you get a plot, you get a plot, you get a plot, you get a plot. But this violates the Native American perspectives on land ownership. Native Americans don't believe in land ownership. Some of the first early conflicts between the white settlers and the natives is like this idea of owning land. It's trying to make the Native Americans sedentary or sit still, when in reality they're more nomadic people. It's trying to make them individualistic, look out for themselves, when in reality they've always been tribal, look out for each other. It's trying to impose what really was southern plantation-style economies on Native Americans to just plan for themselves, do their own thing. The Dawes Act is proposed by Henry Dawes, who thinks of himself as a friend to the Indians, because he's going to keep them from being abused by giving them their own land, their own space to do their own thing, and he's going to turn them into a more assimilationist type of policy. Make them like white America. No more communal, nomadic hunting-gathering. Instead, be individualistic, be sedentary, sit still, farm, do your own thing. The Dawes Act comes to this idea, turn your page, of Indian schools as well, in which kids are removed from their families, taken to these Indian schools, and taught the two most important things in American history. English? Jesus. English and Jesus. The phrase behind these Indian schools, to me, gives me chills. Kill the Indian to save the man. Kill the Indian, save the man. Implying that the only way you can save this person is by killing off their Native American habits, cultures, tendencies, backgrounds, etc. The Dawes Act and these schools are attempts to Americanize or assimilate Native Americans, whereas all the prior approaches were to remove Native Americans. But can we push them out of the way anymore? Hence the change in policy. Now that we can't push them out of the way anymore, there's no more frontier to push them past, the new approach of assimilation takes place. Right? Long gone is the idea from Jackson of pushing them to their own land to mind their own business. Now, we're going to try to instead assimilate them. With this transition also comes the near slaughter of one of the most prominent animals in the American West, the buffalo. Or as somebody from first period said at the end of the year, the buffalo. And the Native Americans lived off every part of the buffalo. The skin, the fur, the meat, the bones. But buffalo are bad for farming because they trample things. They're big-ass animals that go in packs. They trample things. They're bad for trains because they will trample over your railroad tracks. They're bad for infrastructure because there's a lot of them. The white approach, in my opinion, an incredibly sad picture in American history. Each of these is a buffalo skull. Each of those is a buffalo skull as U.S. Army snipers and other private citizens were paid on a per buffalo basis to kill as many buffalo as possible. So we are simultaneously killing the Native Americans' culture while also killing their lifeblood by taking away their buffalo. Now the ecological, the science impact of this time period is great. First, the near extinction of the buffalo. Anytime you almost extinct an entire animal, that's bad for the world. Not to mention, we've been over-farming the soil to no way's point. It's bad for the soil to farm the same thing over and over and over and over again. Whereas in the Great Depression, when America in the 1930s already has their worst economic crisis, this whole area that I circled over there is going to have a really dry couple years, followed by huge windstorms, and all their dirt's going to go away. We're going to have black clouds as far as Chicago, dust as far as California, as whole communities and towns get buried in the Midwest under the dust because they've farmed and farmed and farmed and farmed and farmed to the point that now their dirt is literally just dust and a stiff breeze will blow it away. We'll see later the growth of conservation movements in the late 1800s as they realized that these lands are finite and we should do something with them. Setting aside land for national parks, Yellowstone in Wyoming being the first. In the 1870s, Yosemite and Sequoia in California being next. As we realize, wait, we're ruining our entire world, we should try to start saving some of it. It's one of the reasons why these western states have these national parks that you saw. But most importantly, the frontier is gone. All right, the frontier is more than a place in American history. The frontier is a state of mind. The frontier is an opportunity for what comes next. The frontier is a second chance, which at this point many of you could use. Second chance to wake up today.
For what?
Life.
Oh.
Without a frontier, we have no safety valve. We rule that the frontier is closed in 1890. The text in front of you that I'm going to have you skip is Frederick Jackson Turner's Frontier Thesis. And he argues that it's because of the frontier why America's always progressed. That's where things are equal. That's where people work hard. That's where people try their hand at new things. And without a frontier, what's going to happen next? We rule that in 1890 the frontier is closed. I don't think it's a coincidence that 8 years later we have our first imperialistic war for the next frontier. With no more west to conquer, where would American expansion go? So go ahead and turn to the very, very back, because the last thing I'll talk about is the South. I only have 2 minutes, so I'll do it quickly. Now, the South makes some improvements. Some. The South makes some improvements. The South does start industrializing to very small levels. Birmingham, Alabama becomes a chief area of steel production. Oh, that's cool. Memphis, Tennessee starts producing more lumber. Richmond, Virginia is still farming tobacco. But we see a ton of growth in terms of population, industry, railroads. The South makes a lot of progress economically. But the South is still way predominantly agricultural. The South is still dominated by farming, and of the farming, still dominated by cotton and tobacco. That's a continuity. Another continuity, the South is still largely controlled by the North. It's Northern banking that has all the loans, it's Northern investments, and the South is still way far behind for two big reasons. Reason one, they got a really late start at industrialization. Again, their own fault. Reason two, their workforce is incredibly poorly educated. Again, their own fault. So these two factors are going to keep the South behind economically. And, fun fact, they're doing the same thing with cotton that Brett is doing with corn. After the Civil War, the acres of cotton they're planting doubles. They are producing way more cotton, which then kills the price of their cotton, so that by 1900, over half of all farmers, white and black, are stuck with sharecropping. A system we talked about before. The last piece worth noting is the loss of civil rights for African Americans in the South, which I already covered in Reconstruction. But I would know if I were you the civil rights cases of '83 and Plessy versus Ferguson, which allows the South to establish two different societies which keep black people separate from white society. All right, good job today. Your homework is very, very short. It's very short. Daniel, can you hit pause? Stop. Thanks.
Just